We're going to continue talking about non-Mendelian traits on page 59 in your handbook by taking notes about sex-linked traits. So I want to give you a second. You could even pause the video to copy this down, and then we'll talk a little bit about what sex-linked traits are. So you might want to pause the video so that you can copy and then listen. Sex-linked traits are found on the X sex chromosome. Now, remember, humans have 46 chromosomes. And so I want you to draw this picture with me. I want you to draw two chromosomes that are about the same size and shape. And these are going to be the X chromosomes. If you're a female, you have two X chromosomes, and they're about the same size and shape. And on these chromosomes are genes for your gender, female, but there are also other genes, and these are genes like for color vision, being able to see colors, color vision. If you're a male, you have the X chromosome and a Y chromosome. And if you notice, the Y is shorter. It is smaller. And so sex-linked traits are found on the X chromosome. Now they can't be found on the Y chromosome because only guys have a Y chromosome. Having a Y makes you a guy. So if it was an important trait like color vision, it couldn't be on the Y chromosome because females never get a Y chromosome. So there's room for extra traits on the X, but there's no room for it on the Y. So sex-linked traits are found on the X sex chromosome. Now be careful, we're not talking about chromosomes that look like this. Remember, those are doubled chromosomes. So we're talking instead about the X and the Y chromosomes, and this is actually your very last pair of chromosomes. There are two traits that you need to know, one of which is hemophilia. This is a disorder where your blood does not clot. So for most of us, when we get a cut or a damage, we'll get a scab, and that's your blood clotting. Color vision is being able to see in color. There's one specific type of color blindness called red-green color blindness, and that's what is sex-linked. People who are red-green colorblind can't see the 56. All they see are dots. So these are all recessive, but they're also found on the X chromosome that you can see here in this picture as well. The interesting thing is that with the phenotype, the female is less likely to have this recessive sex-linked trait, but can. But the males express the sex-linked traits more often because they only have one X chromosome. And so what you want to do is copy this chart into your notes as well. For a female, she can have the genotype X big A, and she would be unaffected. Notice that all of the ones on the left are your females. Or she can be heterozygous, and she'd be a carrier. But if she is homozygous recessive, then she would be affected. Notice that we write the recessive letter there on the X chromosome because it is sex-linked or carried on the X. When we look at guys, they're XY. On the X could be a dominant allele, and then the male would be unaffected. There are no male carriers for sex-linked disorders because you notice there's nothing on the Y. Now, the male can have either the dominant allele on the X or the recessive allele on the X. There's nothing on the Y to hide that. That's why males are more likely to show the disease, and why they can't be carriers. Now they can be carriers, men can be carriers for lots of things, like cystic fibrosis and Tay-Sachs, but just not sex-linked traits. So we're going to solve a problem. You have a Punnett square here, and so we're going to solve this problem. Cross a colorblind dad with a mom who is a carrier. What is the chance of the couple having a son who is not colorblind? So one of the first things that we have to do is we have to be able to assign the alleles. Now remember, with sex-linked traits, we write them on the X and the Y. Well, nothing goes on the Y because colorblindness is a sex-linked trait. Sex-linked. So when we look at our dad, we have to start by saying that our dad is XY. And we know that our dad is colorblind, so nothing goes on the Y, but colorblindness is recessive. So we write him as X a. The mom is a carrier. She's XX. Well, carrier, we also know, means heterozygote. So we see that we're going to have the dominant allele and the recessive allele. That's how we make her be a heterozygote. And so we put our man up here, XAY, and our female over here, whoops, always write the dominant first, XA, Xa, and now we combine them in the Punnett square. What if this sperm and this egg? Remember, the men pass on the Y. So what is the chance of the couple having a son who is not colorblind? So when we look in here, we see that these two are the sons. Now, out of all of their children, there's a 25% chance of having a son who is not colorblind. But what we want to clarify here is it's a 25% chance that they would have a child who is a son who is not colorblind. Because if we already know that it's a boy, let's say that we already know it's a boy. If we already know it's a boy, then we don't even look at these. We would just look at the boys. And if we already know that their child is a boy, let's say it's a woman, and she's pregnant, and she goes and she finds out it's a boy. Well, now it's actually a 50% chance because we can see here that we're only looking at the boys, and out of just the boys, only 50% would be not colorblind. So remember, when we look at the whole picture, that would just be a child who is both a boy and not colorblind. But if we know it's a boy, out of those two, there's only two choices, that would be 1 out of 2. So you can see that sex-linked problems are pretty complicated. It's kind of like the high jump of solving genetics problems in track and field. It's a really difficult. What you really have to practice is that it's on the X chromosome, not on the Y, and we have to read our problem carefully. There's one more type of non-Mendelian inheritance, and that's called polygenetic or polygenic. These are traits that depend on many genes. Look how the word poly means many genes. So what this is where you have one phenotype or one trait. For example, skin color. If we look at skin color, there's actually 6 different genes, and all 6 of those genes make proteins, and all 6 of those proteins interact to give you your skin color. And so we see what's called a range of differences. A range is shaped like this bell curve. It means we have a lot of differences. So you don't just have short and tall. Instead, you have a range. And so human height, human weight, human skin color, all of these are polygenic. And what you need to know is that means there's many genes that make many proteins that make many physical appearances. So this is where we're going to stop for today. If you'll please make sure that you complete your summary box. That's all.